All right, so as we speak, it is history that is being rewritten. Just a few seconds ago, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the American President Joe Biden concluded their joint press conference. Now, this was a rare meet, and this, of course, was a rare press meet for the Indian leader as well. The remarks in which both leaders lauded the strengthening of bilateral relationship. And it came after the two had their bilateral meeting at the Oval Office, along with their delegations for these high-stakes talks. Listening to what was said in this press briefing.
Today is a day that has special importance in the history of India-America relations. Our discussions today and the important decisions we have taken have added a new chapter to our comprehensive and a global strategic partnership. They have given it a new direction and a new energy.
Now, the two leaders in their remarks also highlighted about a free and an open Indo-Pacific as their priority. The importance to the region as expected as countering China remains a key priority and a common interest for Washington and also for New Delhi. Now, the Indian Prime Minister also announced the opening of a new U.S. consulate in the tech city of Bengaluru. Alongside, the two leaders also discussed the Ukrainian war. Biden said that the tragedies of the conflict were talked about, and a lot was also discussed on a whole host of different aspects. And during the press briefing, during the question round with members of the press, Biden was asked about his recent comment on the Chinese President Xi Jinping, where he had called Xi a dictator at the Democrats' dinner. And also to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening at this moment, we're being joined in by Voice of America's correspondent Jessica Stone, who is joining us live on this broadcast. We're also being joined by senior journalist Ray Locker, who is also joining us live on this broadcast. Now, Jessica, let me in fact begin with you. This has, of course, been an important press briefing that was given by the Indian Prime Minister and also the American President Joe Biden. A whole host of different issues were, of course, discussed during the bilateral meeting. What do you think stands out in terms of what was said in that press briefing there?
Well, I think the first thing that stands out and will be written about by a great many people here in the United States is the fact that Prime Minister Modi took questions on human rights, took a question on human rights from a Wall Street Journal reporter, and in fact was asked about the human rights record of India, which of course has come under criticism. There are more than 70 members of Congress who have asked the White House to cancel the visit in order to, and some of whom will not be attending the speech in just a few moments' time over that human rights record. But what we heard from Modi today is that, in fact, he leaned on the democratic history of India and said there's no place in India for discrimination, and that human values and humanity mandate that there be no discrimination. So we had a pretty clear denial from Prime Minister Modi today that there is any discrimination or human rights violations inside India. So I can imagine well that will be very well parsed. I think the other main thing I want to bring up is that Prime Minister Modi was very clear about India's position on the conflict in Ukraine. Of course, that is also a source of tension between these two countries, a slight source of tension, but certainly both countries have different perspectives on their relationships with Russia. And he said, quote, the Ukraine conflict hurts the global South the most. He said, we are completely ready to contribute in any way we can to restore peace. We are lending a voice to the priorities of the global South. And so you can well imagine that India will continue to be both a voice for the global South, but also potentially a mediator, as China is attempting to be, between Russia and Ukraine. So those are the two main things that stood out to me.
Absolutely, indeed. And Ms. Ray Locker, if I can bring you in on this. Now, the American president, in his opening remarks, in the lawns of the White House, he described the India-US equation as probably the most important and the defining relationship of the 21st century. What's your assessment of that?
Well, I think he's exactly right. I mean, India is now the most populous nation in the world. It's growing economically. It stands on its own, and the United States has to forge its own relationship with India, not kind of pitted against other countries like Pakistan or China. The U.S.-India relationship is its own thing, and it's only going to get bigger and stronger.
Absolutely, indeed. And also considering, the points of divergence that the United States has, especially with certain European nations such as France and Germany, who would want to deal differently with China. Mr. Raylocker, do you think the United States is in fact trying to forge bonds with India because there is a point of divergence when it comes to its own allies in Europe in terms of how it has to deal with China?
Oh, absolutely. And look, India is only getting bigger and stronger. And in many ways, it's replacing China as a manufacturing center. And I think that's only going to continue. So for the United States to have stronger relations with India, it only helps that.
Absolutely. And Jessica, if I can bring you in on this, in some time from now, we expect the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to be addressing a joint sitting of the Congress. He'll be doing this for a second time in the last few years. And this, of course, puts him in a league of his own. Tell us as to why, something like this is so important in forging closer ties between two nations.
Well, it really is a very special opportunity for the Indian Prime Minister. Essentially, he's getting the pomp and circumstance and the privilege of addressing the U.S. Congress, the likes of which only recently the South Korean president has received from this government. So he will have a speech of about 20 to 25 minutes, I'm told, and he will deliver it in English. And it's a really important audience for some of the reasons we've already discussed. Some of the human rights issues, they are concerns on the minds of members of Congress, but nothing so large as to prevent any type of these defense deals going forward. Certainly, Prime Minister Modi needs to lay out a vision in this speech about the future and how the Indian future and the American future are intertwined, especially when it comes to security and stability, especially when it comes to economic security and stability, as well as peace. And so I think you're likely to have him make a very clear position on that and a clear plea to the Congress to support the initiatives that require congressional approval that will come before them in the coming weeks. And that includes this drone deal of 30 Predator drones that General Atomic is selling, as well as that GE engine deal. So both of those require congressional approval, and I think you'll hear him address, or at least request, that they support all defense cooperation going forward.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed to Jessica Stone and also to Ms. Raylocker for joining us in this broadcast and getting us all those details there. So this is, of course, such an important visit by the Indian Prime Minister, who also took questions from reporters during his press briefing with the President Joe Biden there. And a lot was, of course, said, and it'll be interesting to see as to how all of this will be taken forward by the two leaders in the course of their subsequent meetings. Because remember, the Indian Prime Minister in some time from now will also be addressing the joint sitting of the American Congress, and all eyes will be on the Indian Prime Minister to hear from him as to what he has to say. And this remember, is a rare honor that's been accorded to a leader by the American Congress. And the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the first ever Indian Prime Minister to have been accorded this honor by the American Congress. So we'll, of course, wait and watch as to what he will, of course, have to say in his address to the Congress, which would last for about 30-odd minutes from now. And remember, this is also his very first state visit to the United States of America. And the United States appears to have pulled out all stops in terms of trying to woo India, especially because of the challenges that the United States confronts itself. It sees the emergence of China as a major challenge to the hegemony of the United States, which is one of the reasons why the United States is looking for allies. Now, Europe is not on the same page as the Americans are on as to how China needs to be dealt with. And therefore, the United States is now looking for new allies in terms of taking its ideas for the Indo-Pacific forward, which is the reason why the United States is wooing India in this manner to try and get India on board for the plans that it has for the Indo-Pacific. But remember, India has a foreign policy that is dictated by strategic autonomy. And that is what sets apart India's foreign policy from the foreign policies of other nations. And that also is one of the defining reasons why the United States would prefer to have India in its camp.